SCP-55 Unknown Object Class Keter Special Containment Procedures Object is kept within a 5 by 5 by 2.5 meter square room constructed of cement 50 centimeter thickness with a Faraday cage surrounding the cement walls. Access is via a heavy containment door measuring 2 by 2.5 meters constructed on bearings to ensure the door closes and locks automatically unless held open deliberately. Security guards are not to be posted outside SCP-55's room. It is further advised that all personnel maintaining or studying other SCP objects in the vicinity try to maintain a distance of at least 50 meters from the geometric center of the room, as long as this is reasonably practical. Description: SCP-55 is a self-keeping secret or antimeme. Information about SCP-55's physical appearance, as well as its nature, behavior, and origins, is self-classifying. To clarify, how Site-19 originally acquired SCP-55 is unknown. When SCP-55 was obtained and by whom is unknown. SCP-55's physical appearance is unknown. It is not indescribable or invisible. Individuals are perfectly capable of entering SCP-55's container and observing it, taking mental or written notes, making sketches, taking photographs, or even making audio and video recordings. An extensive log of such observations is on file. However, information about SCP-55's physical appearance leaks out of a human mind soon after such an observation. Individuals tasked with describing SCP-55 afterwards find their minds wandering and lose interest in the task. Individuals tasked with sketching a copy of a photograph of SCP-55 are unable to remember what the photograph looks like, as are researchers overseeing these tests. Security personnel who have observed SCP-55 via closed-circuit television cameras emerge after a full shift exhausted and effectively amnesiac about the events of the previous hours. Who authorized the construction of SCP-55's containment room, why it was constructed in this way, or what the purpose of the described containment procedures may be, are all unknown. Despite SCP-55 container being easily accessible, all personnel at Site-19 claim no knowledge of SCP-55's existence when challenged. All of these facts are periodically rediscovered, usually by chance readers of this file, causing a great deal of alarm. This state of concern lasts minutes at most before the matter is simply forgotten about. A great deal of scientific data has been recorded about SCP-55, but cannot be studied. At least one attempt has been made to destroy SCP-55, or possibly move it from containment at Site-19 to another site, meeting failure for reasons unknown. SCP-55 may present a major physical threat, and indeed may have killed many hundreds of personnel, and we would not know it. Certainly it presents a gigantic memetic and mental threat, hence its Keter classification. Document 55-1 An Analysis of SCP-55. The author puts forward the hypothesis that SCP-55 was never formally acquired by and is in fact an autonomous or remotely controlled agent inserted at Site-19 by an unidentified third party for one or all of the following reasons: to silently observe or interfere with the activities of Site-19, to silently observe or interfere with activities of other SCP locations, to silently observe or interfere with activities of humanity worldwide, to silently observe or interfere with other SCP objects, to silently observe or interfere with redacted. No action to counter any of these potential threats is suggested or indeed theoretically possible. Addendum A. Hey, if this thing is really an anti-meme, why doesn't the fact that it's an anti-meme get wiped? We must be wrong about that somehow. Wait a minute. What if we were to keep notes about what it isn't? Would we remember those? Bartholomew Hughes, NSA. Document 55-2. Report of Dr. John Marachek. Survey Team 19-05127BXE was successfully able to enter SCP-55's container and ascertain the appearance and, to some degree, the nature of the object. Notes were taken according to project methodology, see redacted, after which the container was sealed again. Excerpt from a transcript of personnel debriefing follows. Okay, I'm going to ask you some questions about number 55 now. Number 1, SCP Object 55, the object you just examined. I don't know what you're talking about. I don't think we have a 55. Okay then, redacted. I'd like to tell you to tell me what you've been doing for the past 2 hours. What? Subject appears uncomfortable. I don't know. Okay then, do you remember that we all agreed that it wasn't spherical? That what wasn't? Oh right, it isn't round at all. Object 55 isn't round. So you remember it now. Well, no, I don't know what it is, but I know there is one. It's something you can't remember, and it's not a sphere. Wait a minute. What's not a sphere? Object 55. Object what? Doc, do you remember agreeing that something wasn't shaped like a sphere? Oh, right. It appears to be possible to remember what SCP-55 is not, negations of fact, and to repeatedly deduce its existence from these memories. Personnel involved in Survey 19-055-127BXC reports moderate levels of disorientation and psychological trauma associated with cycles of repeated memory and forgetfulness of SCP-55. However, no long-term behavioral or health problems were observed, and psych assessments of survey personnel showed consistent reports of this distress fading over time. Recommendations: it may be worthwhile to post at least one staff member capable of remembering the existence of SCP-55 to each critical site. We need to talk about 55. Can I smoke? This time the receptionist narrows her eyes at Marion. No, she says. No, you can't smoke anywhere on Site 200. Just because it's an administration building doesn't mean we don't have lungs. Or labor law. Marion notices the exasperation on the young woman's face. I asked you that before, haven't I? Twice, in the last quarter hour, the reception says. You must really need a smoke. She's genuinely puzzled at the repeated question, and she's doing a bad job of concealing her puzzlement. You think this is like Memento, don't you? Marion offers charitably. You think I have no long-term memory? If I stay in one place for too long, I forget why I'm there? The receptionist is only just old enough to remember that film. I guess? Marion smiles sympathetically and shakes her head. It's nothing so simple. Minutes pass. She toys obsessively with her lighter. She is turning 50 this year, and slowly graying, well on her way out of petite and towards little old lady. In her bag, her phone beeps because it's time for a pill, but she tells it to remind her later. There is a slight tremble in her fingers, but that's not age-based infirmity. That's just ordinary nerves. She's nervous because she's here to meet an O5, and O5s are scary. O5s never want to see you for a small thing. It's the end of the world, or nothing. Finally, 40 minutes late, the door to the inner office opens. 4 or 5 high-ranked Foundationeers spill out, carrying laptops or briefcases. As a group, they head straight past reception and out to cars which are waiting. Marion recognizes a few of the faces. The Site 19 site director, the head recruiter for Western Europe. None of them glance in her direction. Once they're gone, 058's assistant pokes his head out through the door. He's 20-something, improbably youthful, like a teenager stuffed into one of his dad's business suits. His haircut is barely regulation. In one hand, he holds a tablet computer showing his boss's day planner. It's packed. The man evidently does not sleep. Marion, you can come through now. The office door closes behind them with an unusually heavily mechanical clunk, as if the whole thing is part of a machine built into the office walls. While Marion takes the indicated chair and sets her bag down, the assistant turns and does some confusing additional things to the door, causing it to make several further strange noises. O5s have non-trivial privacy and security requirements. The office is spacious, but somehow contrives to be dark despite having two big corners of window and broad daylight outside. The walls are all bookshelves and dark wood paneling, perfectly stylish, but a style from the 90s. A little worn and not yet old enough to be fashionable again. As for the fellow behind the desk, well, an O5 never looks like you imagine. Marion takes a deep breath. So, what's the topic? All I got was the meeting invitation, no agenda or subject. I mean, an O5 says jump, you jump, but looking to her right, she notices that the assistant, without saying anything or making any undue noise, has sat his tablet down on the table, produced a gun, and aimed it at her head. Marion stops talking. She sits still in her chair for a little while, absorbing the change of pace, letting her heart rate rise to a hummingbird's, and then start to flatten again. Okay, she hazards. She licks her lips and grips the armrests, otherwise staying perfectly still, waiting for another prompt. The assistant's face is totally neutral now. Like, this is just how meetings go. Maybe it is for people up there. Who are you? 058 asks her. What? Oh God. Let me rephrase. 058 says, Marion Wheeler, 49, with a loving husband and two boys in tow, likes camping, hiking, and ornithology. Boring mother with perfect airtight background and financials as far back as we can examine. And you've got full foundation credentials, which we've never issued, including access to a list of installations and rooms which some of these locations don't exist or were torn down decades ago, and at least one hasn't been built yet. Yet you've got the front door key to it, and that's before we get to your SCP access control lists, which I can only term as egregious. So, you're a spy, and your objectives are misaligned with hers. And Clay wanted to cut Psi 13 on you, but I was able to bring him around. I talked him into a face-to-face. I thought there was a slim chance that if we locked you in a bomb-proof room and asked politely, you'd have the good sense to spare yourself the rest. Marion has long since stopped listening. You dullard, she says, now she can finally speak. I'm your chief of antimemetics. We don't have an antimemetics division, Clay says. Yes, you do. We do. 058 says, we have a memetics division, a telecontainment division, fire services, Ops A, Ops B, personnel, D personnel, and 24 others. We don't have an antimemetics division. Do we have an irony division? Marion asks. She hesitates hopefully. No? All right. Well, try this. Why do you think the antimemetics division would show up in the listing? This is just a cover story, Clay says to 058, not taking his eyes off Marion. It's a good one, but she's had it worked out in advance. Clay, lose the peace, says the 05. Grudgingly, Clay does so. Marion relaxes fractionally. There are SCPs with dangerous memetic properties, she says. There are contagious concepts which require containment, just like any physical threat. They get inside your head and ride your mind to reach other minds, right? Right, 058 says. He could name a score of SCPs fitting this description without even thinking. There are SCPs with antimemetic properties, Marion goes on. There are ideas which cannot be spread. There are entities and phenomena which harvest and consume information, particularly information about themselves. You take a Polaroid photo of one of them, it'll never develop. You write a description down with a piece of paper and hand it to someone, but what you've written turns out to be hieroglyphs and nobody can understand them. Not even you. You can look directly at one and it won't even be invisible, but you'll still perceive nothing there. Dreams you can't hold on to, and secrets you can never share, and lies, and living conspiracies. It's a conceptual subculture of ideas consuming other ideas, and sometimes segments of reality. Sometimes people. Which makes them a threat. That's all there is to it, really. Anti-memes are dangerous, and we don't understand them. Therefore, they are part of the problem. Hence my division. We can do the sideways thinking that's needed to combat something which can literally eat your combat training. 058 stares back at her for a long moment. Clay fidgets, disliking and distrusting the story. But the 05 seems more open to the concept. Name one, he says. Name an antimemetic SCP. SCP-55, Marion says promptly. There is no SCP-55, Clay retorts. Again, yes there is. There isn't, Clay asserts. SCP numbers aren't assigned sequentially. There are gaps. That number hasn't been assigned. It's not superstition. We have enough to be concerned about without arbitrary numerological mysticism. We have SCP-666 and SCP-13, but there's no SCP-1 and there's no SCP-55. Clay, 058 says, you should look over this. He turns his monitor so Clay can see the file that he had just retrieved. Clay bends over and reads it from top to bottom. Stunned, he scrolls back and reads it all a second time. But the file is dated from 2008, 058 says. It's got all the right flags and signatures. It's keyed and coded. It's real. You've seen this before? Clay asks him. Never in my life, 058 says. As far as I can remember, anyway. On the other hand, if the content is accurate, both of us have probably seen it dozens of times. Clay glares at Marion. This isn't possible. Marion nearly spits. For Christ's sake, Clay, how long have you been working here? But if this SCP is this powerful, he begins. Yes. Who wrote the file? The 05 finishes. And for that matter, how was this interview conducted? And who is this Bartholomew Hughes? And most importantly, how do you, Miss Wheeler, retain knowledge of any of this? Bart Hughes wrote the file. He's dead. What happened to him? You don't want to know. There is a long pause while both 058 and his assistant react to this. In fact, they pass through a long, discrete sequence of reactions. Indignation at the seeming rudeness, confusion at Wheeler's incaution in front of sinister superiors, surprise at the magnitude of the claim, pure disbelief, comprehension, and finally, horror. What, 058 asks carefully, would happen if we did know? It would happen to you as well, Marion says levelly. As for the rest of your questions, we manage that pharmaceutically. You know we have Class A amnestics for people who very badly need to forget things? Of course you do. Who could forget about Class A amnestics? Well, in antimemetics, we have a different pill for people who need to remember things that would otherwise be impossible to remember. Nestics, class W, X, Y, and Z. Same Greek root as the word mnemonic. The M is silent. In her bag, her phone beeps again. With a nod of approval from the 05, Marion reaches into her bag and turns her phone off, acknowledging the prompt this time instead of postponing it. She pulls a blister pack from another pocket and pops a pill out. It's hexagonal and green. She holds it up and is satisfied to see a flicker of recognition on 058's face. He's beginning to put it back together. Marion says, "These are Class W nestics, the weakest, suitable for continual use. 2 pills per day. Go down to the site pharmacy and ask. The pharmacist will claim they don't stock any such thing. They're misremembering. Tell them to double check." 058 sighs. And now I think I get it. I see why we're having this conversation at all. Yes, Marion says, popping a second pill out and handing it over to him. It's because you missed a dose. You're supposed to be on these, the same as me and everybody on my staff. It's the only way we can work. You forget to take a pill, and then you forget all the information that the pills were helping you retain. You forgot why you were taking them, who gave them to you, and where to get more. You forgot about me and my entire department, and now I have to bring you up to speed. And if I take this, 058 says, I'll remember this whole conversation and we won't have to have it again? Hopefully not, Marion said. Clay pipes up. Should I be taking those? Sorry, kiddo, 058 says. Need to know. Maybe when you're an 05 yourself. He swallows the pill. Marion swallows her too. So, what is SCP-55? 058 asks. SCP-55 is nothing, Marion says, now relaxing entirely. SCP-55 is, as described in the file, a powerful information autosuppressor. As far as experimentation has uncovered, it can only be defined in negative terms. We can only record what it isn't. We know it isn't safe or Euclid. We know it isn't round or square or green or silver. We know it isn't stupid. And we know it isn't alone. But what we do know is that it's weak. It's weak because it's the only antimemetic agent in our possession which has a physical entry in the files. We have paper records of the thing. We have containment procedures. It's not safe, which means it's dangerous, but it's contained. 058 blinks. You have procedures? Where? Marion points at her head. Then how many other antimemes are out there? How much more dangerous do they get? 10 that I know of, Marion says. Statistically, probably at least 5 more that I don't know of. This does not count the amount of antimemetic entities freely roaming the halls, not under containment. There are at least 2 in this room right now. Don't look. I said don't look, it's pointless. 058 does an impressive job of controlling himself, keeping his attention focused on Marion. Clay doesn't fare so well and quickly sweeps the whole room, even checking behind his back, making an ass of himself essentially. He finds nothing. He looks baffled. There is an invisible monster, which follows me around and likes to eat my memories, Marion explains patiently. SCP-4987. Don't look it up, it's not there. I've learned to manage it. It's like a demanding pet. I produced tasty memories on purpose so it doesn't eat something important, like my passwords or how to make coffee. And what's the other one? Clay asks. With another nod from 058, Marion goes to her bag again. This time she pulls out a gun and shoots Clay twice in the heart. More aghast than in pain, Clay collapsed sharply against the bookcase behind him. Pulling his head around to face Marion, he manages. How did you... Marion stands and aims more carefully and shoots him a third time, this time in the head. 058 again does an impressive job of not reacting. That's Clay's gun, he deadpans. You stole it from him. It's tricky to steal a firearm this heavy from someone without them noticing, Marion explains, unloading it and carefully setting it down. But stealing a firearm and then stealing their memory of the theft is a little easier. Like I said, a pet. Some pets are dumb enough that they can be trained. Yes, 058 says evenly. That much I'd guessed. But why? Because you were supposed to be taking Class W Nestics, Marion says. You can't skip a dose of Class W Nestic. I've tried. You can postpone a dose, but you can't forget, unless someone actively prevents you from taking it. There's only one person who can get close enough to do that, and that's your assistant. And remember when I asked him how long he'd been working here? He didn't answer, 058 says. I thought you were being rhetorical. He doesn't work here, Marion says. He's an antimeme. Since when do you have an assistant? You don't have an assistant, Brent. Look at this office. It's got one desk. You've got a receptionist outside. She's the one who screens your calls and schedules your meeting. Where does Clay even sit? Where does he fit? Don't blame yourself. You're human, and these things are redaction incarnate. You need to think like a space alien to get around them. 058 asks a question which in any other workplace would be absurd. Is he dead? Maybe, Marion says. I can put his corpse in her research queue and we'll see what we can see when we open him up. There's a duality here, though. They're like parallel universes sharing the same space. It's conceptual versus concrete, figurative versus physical. It's very unusual for things to cross over. I don't even know what Clay was, but he had a human body, which instantly makes him weird, even by our standards. As ever, search for stalemate continues, and I will let you know if we get any closer. Any side effect of these pills? 058 asks. Nausea and dramatically increased risk of pancreatic cancer, Marion says. And very bad dreams,